Hi, welcome back to Detective Story. I'm Mike Hammond. Thanks a lot for joining in again. We really appreciate it. I hope that you're enjoying our material and the shows. We really appreciate your support. And if you like it, please continue to subscribe, download, leave us a review, comments. You can always reach out directly to me if you like. If you'd like to whatever you'd like to talk about. I'm happy to have the interaction. The best way to do that's my email, which is always in the show notes. That's mike@detectivestory.net. I'm always happy to hear from all of you. So today we're moving in just a little different direction. We're going to start doing some interviews with some people. One of the great things about the response we've gotten from the show is the really interesting people that I've gotten the chance to talk to. And starting today, we're going to do some interviews with some of these folks, and I think you'll enjoy it. I will continue to do the discussions about detective work and homicides and cases I worked on and cases I'm aware of as they come up. And there's a lot. Got plenty of those kind of cases on the docket to tell you about. But with today, we're gonna start doing some of these interviews, and we are starting today with a woman who is really fascinating and just has a tremendous story. And that story she documented in this book, The Other Side of the Gun: My Journey from Trauma to Resiliency. It's available on Amazon in all its forms. I highly recommend this book. It's only 170 pages. It's pretty quick read. It's really well written. It's concise, to the point. She does discuss the issue that brought her here, the incident, but what she focuses on is her recovery from that and how she was able to find joy and happiness, move on with her life, and really begin the process of not only helping herself, but many other people. The story that led her here is this. Her father was a detective with the LA Police Department. His name was Thomas Williams. And on Halloween, October 31st, 1985, he was shot and murdered in a straight assassination by gang members as he was picking up his son, his 6-year-old son, Susan's younger brother, from his son's preschool. The gang members had followed him, watched him for some time, and determined that was where he was most vulnerable. In the last moments of his life, Detective Williams had to make a really difficult decision that I hope none of us ever have to face. He saw them coming, knew what was about to happen, could have defended himself and possibly survived, or make the decision that he did, being the human that he was, alert the kids, including his own son, parents, and teachers walking out of the school. Of course, he chose the latter, and none of the students, parents, or anybody else was injured. Detective Williams did not survive the attack. His attackers were identified, prosecuted, and the main players remain in prison to this day, and hopefully that's where they will end their days. So we talked. I talked with Susan. She talks about her book, her recovery, and um, all that went into it. I think you'll find it interesting, and I hope that you do. Um, so please give it a listen and let us know your thoughts. I will talk to you soon. Hi, this is Mike Hammond. Let's take a moment from our regular programming for a real talk about safety and security. I want to introduce you to Blue Knight Security Solutions. Yep, Knight, like King Arthur's court. Your ultimate partner in protection. Blue Knight Security Solutions isn't just your average security company. They are a team of elite detectives, investigators, and law enforcement professionals with unparalleled expertise. Especially in this realm, I wouldn't vouch for just anyone, but I confidently endorse Blue Knight because I have seen their skills firsthand. Whether you need real world investigative prowess or comprehensive security measures for your business, synagogue, church, school, or any gathering place you feel at risk, Blue Knight Security Solutions has you covered. From risk assessment to tailored security plans, they'll ensure your safety is priority number one. So, if you're in need of real safety, contact Blue Knight Security Solutions today at 773 706 4920 or visit BlueKnightSecuritySolutions.com. Again, Night like the round table, BlueKnightSecuritySolutions.com. Tell them I sent you. Back to Detective Story, and as I talked about on the introduction, we have a great guest today that I think you're really going to enjoy, Susan Snow, and her amazing book that I highly recommend here, The Other Side of the Gun. I'll let her talk about that. We'll discuss it more, but really proud to have you here, Susan. Thank you very much. First,
Thank you for having me.
well,
It's actually an
yeah.
honor for me. I love the Leo family, and from wherever you sit in the
Great.
in the United States or otherwise. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's good to be here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So let's just start, if you don't mind, and tell my listeners a little bit just about yourself, so they have a. I give them a general idea, but from your own mouth, let us know a little bit about
Sure.
you, please.
Well, I am married. I have been with him for 38, almost 39 years, which is crazy to think about. Thank you.
Congratulations, just on
Thank
that
you.
alone.
It's not an
Amazing.
easy. It's not easy. We went through everything together.
Uh,
So, and I have three wonderful kids, and I won't go into their ages because
yeah.
it
Right.
makes me a little old.
I hear you.
But they're all
Fair
adults.
enough.
We'll just say that.
Yeah.
And one of them is actually married. So, yeah,
Uh,
I am a speaker. I'm an international speaker. Am I'm a resiliency coach, and I'm also right now in real estate. I've been in real estate for 14 and a half years. Um, but even in real estate, I recognize that there's some people hurting and need to find their resiliency. So here I am.
Right. And that's a good jumping off point, I think, because I just had a conversation before we jumped on with my ex brother in law, who I'm still really close with. In fact, we have a standing joke that I got custody of him in the divorce, even though he's 50, in his 50s. But he's a good man. And we were talking about, trauma and, uh, you know, the everybody's trauma is their own, right? Like he was talking, he owns a bar, and he was talking about how many people he knows in the industry. Chicago is a big bar town,
Mm.
and just a social in that way, and how many people he's lost, and when he tries to take stock in it's a lot. And um, I made the point to him, and I think this is relative to what you just said. I mean, you don't have to. Everybody's trauma is their own, right? And what they go through, and I think sometimes with people, we have conversations with people, your story as I described in the intro, but just to reiterate it, I mean, your story starts long before you're 17 years old, but the turning point, of course, was your father was by all accounts, an amazing and outstanding detective and police officer of the LA Police Department, was murdered, really because of his great police work, and that starts this kind of journey for you that nobody should have to go through, but you've very successfully navigated it. And of course, I'm a retired homicide detective, and so people, make the assumption often that, oh my God, it's nothing compared to what you've seen. I hear that a lot. It's nothing compared to. I'm just my stuff. Yeah, but the truth is,
Everybody's human.
it
That's the bottom
right,
line.
right. That's it. And your own trauma is your own. It doesn't, and minimizing it is not the way to
Right.
go. I don't think it's just, and our comparative trauma doesn't
Right.
work either. I mean, I think you can be realistic about it. I can say, well, it's not, yeah, I saw a lot of horrible things, but I didn't lose my father like you did, or, I didn't get wounded severely in Afghanistan or whatever. I mean, that comparative trauma doesn't really work. You can acknowledge it
Right.
and be respectful of it, but it
But
doesn't.
I can't know what you've gone through, and you can't know what I've gone through, or vice versa. And I think you're right. It's even in grief. Grief is it's hand in hand with trauma a lot of times, and so um, when somebody says things like, I know how you feel, well, you really don't, because you didn't lose that particular person. Um,
Right.
we all have the same things that can come up for us, but we're not in that same state of mind, as the person that has had the loss or that particular trauma.
Right.
So,
Agreed. And it's really difficult, I think, to look at someone from the outside and maybe have an inkling of their story, or have them tell you part of their story, and try and understand what it really means to them. It really is up to them to kind of define that. And because, like you said, everybody is human, everybody has their own experience and reaction to
mhm,
experiences. I mean, so that's the way it
mhm,
is. I believe. But so you know, let's kind of start with some of the stock stuff questions. But I have my own. After reading your book, I'd really like to know, if you don't
sure.
mind. But so um, so you kind of mentioned, and this is a good, I think, place to start. What was? Can you define your turning point uh, to really healing? You know what I mean? From Because I think that it certainly didn't come anywhere near your father's death, right?
No,
I mean, it
14
was
years.
many years, 14
Hmm.
years. And can you like pinpoint that time where you said, okay, this was the turning point, or was it kind of more like a spectrum
Well,
thing?
tell you, I can tell you that my initial introduction to therapy was right after my dad was killed, and um, LAPD was the one that came in and said, "We're going to pay for a therapist for each one of you," and I didn't know what therapists, like, in my mind as a 17-year-old kid. I thought, if you go to a therapist, you're crazy, right? But at the time, um, I just did what I was supposed to be doing. I People would just push me in the right direction, in whatever direction, and that's
Sure.
the direction I would go. So my mom said, basically, you are going to do this, and I said, okay. And what was really interesting is that I saw the man for an entire year, and our our sessions were very shallow. They were very much around my relationship with my mother, my brother, my boyfriend, who's my husband
Yeah.
now, and school. And not once
Yeah.
in that entire year did he ask how that night affected me or ask me the questions. And being a teenager and in the 80s, there were no conversations around mental health, anyways. But I was
Yeah. Sure.
17 and I didn't know how to verbalize. What 17-year-old would be able to verbalize all
No,
the
I was just
things
thinking the
that they
same
were
thing.
dealing with,
It's just
right?
hard.
Like, even
It's
for a
just
grown
hard to be
adult,
17 and
right?
all.
So,
Right. Right.
yeah. So, I mean, that was at the end of that year, and seeing him, like, every session, I kept thinking, this guy is going to do it. Today is the day. He's going to heal me. He's going to make me feel better. He's going to take all these horrible thoughts out of my head, and it never happened.
Right.
And after a year, he looked at me and said, I was a well rounded young lady and that I was going to be fine for the rest of my life. And I didn't need him anymore. He didn't need to see me. And
See the certification on the wall. I'm really
I
good at this.
was
Just
just like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm a
Yeah.
mess.
Right.
And I don't know how to tell you I'm a mess, but I'm a mess, right?
Right.
So it started this mindset early on of, I'm broken and even a professional can't help me. And I'm just going to have to deal with all of these, you know, anxiousness and suicidal ideation, which I didn't know that's what it was,
Right. Yeah. Right.
and severe depression for the rest of my life. Like, that's just how I'm going to be, right? And
Yeah.
it wasn't until 14 years later, and I'm now married, and I married that boyfriend, and we have 2 kids, and I'm working as a hairdresser. We were here in Colorado 2 years, and in 1999 is when the Columbine shootings happened in Littleton, Colorado. And I was at work that day. I went in and turned on the TV in the back room, was taking a break, and started to watch the coverage. And I don't know what, like, I couldn't tell you what was happening to me, because you remember, I was supposed to be fine for the rest of my life. But as I
Right. Yeah.
was
Right.
watching the TV and seeing the school and seeing the ambulance and seeing the police officers and seeing all the kids that were around my same age, I started having flashbacks. And I started panicking. I started sweating. I turned pale white. And at the time, I was not ready to tell anyone my story here in Colorado. So nobody really knew who I was, or, anything. So my coworkers were totally perplexed as to why I was having this particular experience happening and reaction. And so I had to do my clients the rest of the day. So I did what I always do, and I put what I call my emotional mask on. The mask of, I'm fine. This isn't going to affect me. I'm going to go about my day. I'm going to do my work, and this is all going to be fine. Fine, fine, fine. Like, my favorite word.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Um,
Right.
so I did my day. I went on, and just my clients were none the wiser. I walked out the door, and my world completely collapsed. I started spiraling, and
Yeah.
all of the old feelings, all of the old anxiety, all of the old suicidal ideation came flooding back, and I couldn't understand why. And
Yeah.
so it was a couple days later, 2 or 3 days later, my husband had just watched this happen. He knew I was spiraling. And he just met me at the door and said, you have 2 choices. You either get help, or I'm putting you in a hospital. And I didn't want to leave my kids.
Yeah.
But then again, I wanted to leave I wanted to leave, but I didn't want
Yeah.
to leave my
Sure.
kids. And so I went to the doctor, and the doctor put me on antidepressants, because that's what they do. And then my doctor said, now we need to find you a therapist. And I thought, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
14 years
Been
ago,
there.
I had a therapist and he couldn't fix me. What makes you think someone else is going to be able to do it? And he said, well,
Right.
you need to take a chance, and gave me a referral of this woman who I am so blessed that I actually did. I just took the leap and I said, okay, I'm going to go see her. And I never looked back. It was the best experience for me because she specialized in severe PTSD and severe trauma. And um, the minute, like 5 minutes into our session, she said, Susan, everything that you've gone through since you were 17 years old is 100% normal because you have PTSD. And at that point, I was like really confused because I thought, wait a minute, I didn't go to war. I'm not in the
Yeah.
military.
Right.
And she said, anyone who has experienced a traumatic, a thing in their life can experience PTSD. But what you need to know is that PTSD isn't something that goes away. It's something you
Right.
manage. You learn to manage it with different modalities. And, I describe this moment as the sky opening up and rainbows shooting out of it because I finally had answers. And I knew at
Yeah.
that very moment that I wasn't crazy.
Right.
And so I knew that, I, now that I had answers, she would be able to guide me in the way that I needed to heal.
Yeah.
So I had hope.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's amazing. It's really uh well, first of all, have the wherewithal and the courage to go back. You know, you and I talked a few weeks ago, and just as an introduction thing, we had a nice conversation, and we talked about this a little bit. And it's valuable to say again, therapists like medical doctors or policemen, or I mean, are human beings, and they're going to be their motivations, everything, their quality of what they do, everything's going to change, and especially with therapy, it's a lot about finding a fit, right, and finding somebody that communicates in a way that communicates to you that you can understand, right. I went down that road. I think that I always wanted to be a homicide detective. I read a book when I was in Truman Capote's book In Cold Blood when I was like 16, and I just thought, oh, this is unacceptable. I need to, I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
articulate it, but whatever. I start this journey that eventually leads me to the Chicago Police Department, but when I actually became a homicide detective, I was excited and really wanted to do well, but I was after about 6 months, I was completely overwhelmed by the amount of violence and death, and I was just like, how's this sustainable
Right.
for a lifetime,
Yep.
and somewhere in there I saw I went to the department therapist, and he was a good guy, but it was not a good fit, because I mean, all he it's a similar experience to you. It seems like, I mean, I was older than you were when you started, but he was just stuck on telling me, how good a person I was and how good a detective I was, what a reputation I had, and all of that. And at first, it was nice, thank you, but then it became like, well, I finally had to tell him, look, hey, part of the reason I'm here is, I hear what you're saying, but when I look at myself in the mirror, I don't see that person that you're
Right.
describing, and I couldn't make him understand that. So finally, I went through a couple of iterations of that, and then
You go through imposter
I really,
syndrome for sure because
yeah,
they
right,
label
right,
you and
yeah,
you're like, okay, what?
right, right, right. Sound like me, but okay. Uh, Yeah, and that kind of epiphany or changing point for me actually didn't come until after I retired. Through all that stuff, and where I probably needed more guidance. But I was retired, and a good friend of mine, police officer, as a commander, was shot and killed. And I was the first time in many years I could do nothing. I couldn't. I was retired. I was calling my buddies working and saying, "Hey, what can I do? Can I?" And they're like, "Mike, nothing. We got it.
Yeah.
It's done." And I just, for a couple of days, I paced around my apartment like a wild animal and just thought I can't even control my own
Yeah.
thoughts. So I just made a call and same, I hooked into this amazing therapist who I think he just understood from the start that I was data driven. I need to know, why is my brain work
Right.
like this? Why is, this uh, I don't, and he was great at communicating to me that way. What do the studies show? What is this? Why am I this way? Why can I deal at such a calm, high level at work? It seems like, and in my personal life, I just can't get my shit together.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I mean,
I get that though. And it's you
yeah,
start to think that you're broken, which you are not broken. Parts of you
right,
are broken, but that's where the healing comes into play. And I
yeah,
hate when people say, "Oh, I'm so broken." Well, you're broken up. A piece of you is broken, but
yeah,
you're not broken, right? Because
yeah,
there is always healing. But you brought up a point that was important, is that for you had to find, just like I had to find, someone who I felt connected to, that I knew that I could be vulnerable with, because I was going to have to be vulnerable and share everything and be completely honest about everything that was going on in my brain, for the healing to really happen. And so I feel like, and I've had conversations with folks that have said, "Oh, yeah, I've, seen this therapist 5 times and I don't feel like it's going anywhere and therapy is not working for me." And I think the important thing too is that you need to understand that, like, if you're going to a therapist for the healing, that's about you, it's not about them. And it's really important to keep that as your forefront, is that this is your life, it's not their life, right? So,
yeah,
in order for you to heal at a high level, you need to connect yourself with someone who can understand you at a high level.
yeah,
And it's just like any other job. Like, you just have to align with the person that's going to help you guide through whatever it is that you're dealing with. So, yeah,
yeah.
I mean, it's
Agreed. And I think that if you start to, unfortunately, I think people, I wish you didn't have to kind of, we didn't have to kind of reach the bottom, to make the decision that, okay, I'm going to invest in this because I have no other options. But like you, with your husband confronting you and telling you, and me deciding, how am I going to walk out this door with this rage and anger and, uh, you know, that's what it took for me to say, okay, I don't have the tools, the
right.
toolbox to deal with this. I need somebody, and I wish it didn't have to get to that point. Sometimes it does, but if it does, I always tell people, look, the first therapist you walk in the door with might not be the right one. Be open, be honest, but also realize, it's no shade on them. It's just, if it doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel right, and keep trying. But that's hard, and it's
Well,
hard.
and I
Ever,
think too,
uh,
vulnerability has a lot to do with it, because vulnerability and fear, the fear
yeah,
of being vulnerable with someone is like probably the most frightening thing that people can go through, right? And
sure,
because at that point you're kind of out there, you're kind of raw. I mean, that's my book. I mean, if you can't figure I'm sure you figured that one out.
right,
Like, I am all out there,
yeah,
like 100% completely vulnerable, right? and
yeah,
and and that's a scary place to be for people. But I will tell you, and why I wrote the book was that, not just to heal myself, but also to help people to understand that they have to do the work in order to heal. And in
Yeah.
part of that is you gotta find a way to move through the fear of being vulnerable and your purpose. Your purpose is
Yeah.
whatever it is to you, right? So if it's in a relationship, if it's, you're trying to hold on to your job, or you're, whatever it is that you're doing to better yourself, to,
Yeah.
for your mental health, um, that needs to be your purpose, your kids, your grandchildren, whatever it is, right?
Right.
And for me, personally, every time I had that fear, every time I started dipping my toes into that area of, oh my God, this is scary. This is so
Yeah.
scary. I just put the blank faces of the people that were out there that needed to hear what I had to say and needed to know
Yeah.
that they're not alone.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, and I think that's the biggest thing is the fear of, will this work? Will this not work? How much work do I have to do?
Right. Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a
it
journey,
is.
right? I mean, first of all, let me again give you a scratch on the book because it struck me in a lot of ways. I mean, it brought out a lot of emotion for me. I mean, just and I took some notes here to talk to you about, I'm going to end up jumping around it, but that's
It's fine.
okay. I mean, like one of the things that uh, you talk about that is I think this will make a lot more sense to people in like first responder communities and military, but it really hit me hard is kind of the overwhelming kind of pomp and circumstance of police funerals and all that goes into that. I mean, I'll be honest, I've been to so many, and the first one when I was 22 years old, I was doing an internship in college as part of the criminology program, and in July 1st of 1987, I saw a policeman, sergeant of the sheriff's department. His name was Kevin Hartz, get shot and killed in front of me at a domestic disturbance, and I had no way to process
Right.
that. 22 years old, especially, young men, their brains don't even develop until they're about
Mm-hmm.
25. All this I learned later. I mean, I was lucky in a way that I had the officer that I was assigned to ride with was a
Mm-hmm.
Vietnam vet, had experience with trauma. He had no experience at all with like therapy and treatment at all, but he was a good man, and he kind of guided me through that in a way that I didn't stay terrified the rest of my life. But uh, that that was the first time I saw a police funeral and the overwhelming. It's a great thing. I'm not saying that it should policemen, firemen.
Absolutely.
I mean, they should be honored, and I always
Mm-hmm.
felt proud of that when I did it and being part of it. And when it was somebody close to me later, it was harder, and each time was
Mm-hmm.
harder. And uh, to be perfectly honest, I don't really go to them anymore unless it's somebody I really know. It's just because just mentally,
Oh,
it's
it
tough.
is. 100%.
It
Yep. Yep.
wears me on it, and I really admire the fact that you talk about in your book. You saw that officer was killed there in Colorado, and your first thought was his 15-year-old daughter, and so you made yourself go to that, and I think that's incredibly courageous, and uh, it just had to be a lot for you, and you describe it as being a
It
lot,
was. It
but
was a lot, but I feel like since I was in my healing journey, it was a step that I had to take, and I had to take it alone. Um,
yeah,
and the experience was something that I didn't expect. Um, and the way I was treated, I did not expect that at all.
Yeah.
I was treated like royalty, and I mean, I kept thinking it was the imposter syndrome. You know,
Right.
I shouldn't be
Yeah. I
standing
hear it.
with these
I hear you.
dignitaries. Like, I shouldn't be sitting with these
Yeah,
dignitaries, but that's the respect that's given as well.
sure.
But
Yeah. And well, and from my perspective, your father's the person he was and the work he did earned that right for you to
yep,
be there, to be that person, and to be respected.
yep,
And I've been through it, and I know that every policeman there was saying to each other, you know, a woman lost her father, and there's a deep respect there that
I've met some
it's
of
hard to
those men.
describe.
I've met men that were at my dad's funeral or were a part of the detail, and it's been pretty incredible hearing the stories and how much it affected them. Um,
Yeah,
so I take it as pride. I have pride for my dad and the respect that he had within the department, and
sure.
just who he was as a human being. And so I just have great pride when I hear those stories.
You should, and that's great. I mean, it's a testament to him, and it's part of his legacy of who he was and who you are, right? I mean, um, I think we discussed this a little bit. I'm not a particularly religious person. I'm also not uh, like an atheist or anything like that. It's just whatever. It's my own thing. I respect people of faith a great deal. I don't want to disrespect God just in case, like W.C. Fields, hedging my
Yeah.
bets all the time. But I just saw so many horrible things over the years. It's hard for me to reconcile in my head that it's God's fault or it's God's plan or
Right.
anything
I
like that.
understand that.
Uh, but I never mean to demean anybody else's faith. That's just where I'm at
Mhm.
with it. But I always admire when people are able to. And in this podcast, I've interviewed some of the family members of some of my victims I worked on, and it's just amazing to me how they have recovered and found and been able to. And a lot of it's faith based, and I admire and appreciate it, and the fact that they can find joy again and have a life and think back fondly about their loved ones without it being overwhelmingly painful. It's super impressive to
Well, I
me.
think that, and I think I had told you this before, like I found my purpose in my dad's death. And I know, when I say that, sometimes people cringe about it, but it is true. Like, he had a purpose within his death as well. A lot of good
Yeah,
has come out of it. Um, and being as tragic as it was, um, a lot of good has come out of it as well. But for me, um, I just feel like with that, it just gave me um, the drive, the purpose, and
yeah,
I writing this book, I literally felt my dad like kicking me in the tush to get it out there and to get it done. And
yeah,
I always tell people, like, I am my father's daughter, 100%. Um, so
yeah. It comes through. It comes through. I mean, uh, I obviously didn't know your father. I was in college when this happened, and I was surprised when I first read your kind of bio and that. I'm like, I'm so well versed, unfortunately, or for whatever reason, in policemen killed in line of duty across the country. I just have always paid that. I'm like, it's amazing. But I was 80. I was a sophomore in
yeah,
college and just goofy, probably just not paying attention, not
Yeah.
understanding. I don't think until July 1st of 1987 I really understood the weight of it
Mm-hmm.
at all. Um, but I've read quite a bit about him since you and I first talked, and you know, we have a saying in Chicago: the best compliment that you can get from another policeman that you respect is that you're the real police. That guy's the real police. She's the real police. And that is a simple but powerful message that we have for each other. Meaning, you do it
Mm-hmm.
right, you do it well, and people
Mm-hmm.
respect. And by all accounts, I think in the Chicago parlance, your father was the real police.
Thank you.
So
That means a lot.
and you certainly, based on the book, uh, he'd be very proud.
Oh, thank you.
You certainly care.
Thank you.
So all right, let's let Mike Hammond take the attempt of being a hardcore
All righty.
journalist here.
I'm ready.
Yeah. So this is not going to be at all like that. I'll never be. Um, but I noticed some things I just wanted to
Sure.
discuss with you in a book that hit hard. Like you say, I'm a survivor. And I'm going to back that up with some other things you said here. But I found myself in this mentality a few years ago of meeting some people that were clearly in distress, and but they identified themselves as survivors, and I started to see that as a negative connotation a little bit, like I'm going to get through it, or I'm going to do whatever it takes to get through it. And sometimes those things weren't healthy, weren't good for people around them, and they're bouncing in and out of relationships or having a hard time, whatever. But you follow up with some really interesting stuff to that. It's not just I'm a survivor. It's you say you chose not to be a victim, and you chose to do the healthy thing and not the victim thing, which I think is really critical and a keen observation by you. Can you just tell me a little bit how do you come to those kind of observations beyond just I'm not a victim, I'm not going to be a victim,
Okay. Well,
or I'm a
yeah,
survivor,
absolutely.
but
Well, we talked about this too. So a part of being a survivor is actually is also finding forgiveness. And how I looked about it was this. In being a survivor, I was also needed to find forgiveness for myself, not for them, but for my own self. Because
uh,
if I allowed them to make me angry, to ruin my life, to send me down, some terrible roads, then I'm giving them my power. And in order to have my power, I needed to do both. I needed to have the mentality of a survivor and not a victim. Because even being a victim, you're giving them it's very much intertwined.
right,
So I decided early on I was not going to let them take my life. They took
yeah,
my father, they took my mother because she went down the other road of the victim mentality. And so did my brother for a short amount, for some time in his early years as a young man. He's no longer there. He's, coming around the survivor land.
nice. I was going to
Yeah,
get around
yeah,
to asking
yeah.
you about your
Yeah, he
brother
is.
because
He's moving in the right directions, and I'm
awesome,
so, so, so proud of him.
good,
But that was a part of it, is that I saw what was happening to my mother, and I saw what was happening to my brother, and I like said hard no. Like I put a line in the sand, and that was it. And I really felt like from the very get-go, I always felt like I would have my dad like on my shoulder, and I would talk to him and be like, well, you know, I need to live.
Yeah.
And you gave me life and I need to live. And this is important for me to carry on and be the best human I can be. Right. And so a part of that was not moving into that victimhood.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's, I think that's a powerful message that whole thing of I'm a survivor. I think it has to be coupled with I'm also not a victim, right? I think that's a really powerful message that you send there. And then you already touched on it a little bit. I was going to ask, how, because it came up in the first couple episodes I did where I interviewed family members of victims of some of the cases I worked on. And, you know, a key part to them was the forgiveness. They had forgiven both of, the offenders in that case. And this taught me something a little bit about myself too. They've forgiven them and again, I think it was for their
Mm-hmm.
part to let their part of it go, and because both of them, made the observation like, I don't want to ever want them out of prison,
Right.
but I've forgiven them, and in my life, I've moved on from that hate and
Mm-hmm.
anger, which I admire, and taught me some valuable lessons because it is that's something that is important to do because you can't live with like there's this great quote and man it wasn't T.S. Eliot I don't think but whatever the quote is I sat with my anger until she told me her real name was grief and when I read that I thought Phew, that's that's tough
That
that's
sucks you
tough
right
but boy
between
is
the
that
eyes, doesn't it? Yep.
it really
Yep.
does. It really does, and I have that written down that I look at quite often. And then I got this little note here on reflection, and this is again something I think that you and I share, and a lot of the journey to heal and to kind of be better as you end up saying to yourself, I want to be a better person for my loved ones, for my kids, for the people in my life that depend on me, my friends, and that. And that journey is part of recovery to be a better person. But you mentioned too there, and I think this is a really important part. At some point, you realize, oh, I want to be. Part of this is being a better version of myself all the time for
Mm-hmm.
myself, because I want to be a better version of
Mm-hmm.
myself all the time. And it takes work and it takes, I don't always do it well. And I fall back sometimes into being, whatever, angry and frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a journey and you're always trying to do it. And sometimes I think early on you wrap it in and it's probably okay. I'm not a therapist,
Right.
myself, but you wrap it in saying, I want to be a better father first. I want to be a better person for my kids, and then I want to be a better person for all the friends and people that count on me and that call me in the middle of the night when they're in a jam. Like I have this kind of reputation as a guy that always answers the
Mm-hmm.
phone, and uh, um, so you get wrapped up in that, and some of that's ego. Uh, and then it somehow along the way, and you articulated this well in your book. You realize, yeah, it's also like I want to be a better me.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, for
You know.
sure. I, it's crazy when you get moving towards resiliency, you know, um, from the healing part. You see things and you see life a lot differently and a lot clearer. Um, and you recognize things that are unhealthy and things that are healthy. And that was part of the lesson that I had in writing my book as well, because, um, my example is my relationship with my mom. It was fractured prior to my dad dying, but I didn't realize exactly what I was dealing with until last year. um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so it was just it was just clear to me that that was a combined trauma,
Yeah.
and so it's just everything becomes a little bit more clear when you get to that point of healing and being able
Yeah.
to look in the mirror and being actually proud of how far you've come. Because and I tell people, and especially the people I coach, is that every little step is a win, right? And you have
Yeah.
to celebrate that, right? You have to look at where you were and how far you've come, and
Yeah.
but don't lose sight of where you want to continue to go. um, and so you got to kind of step out of the ego as well. Because
Yeah.
I wrote a book and because I've done all this, therapy and healing and cognitive therapies and all the things, does not mean that I'm still not making, uh, good decisions, or, the
Right.
right decision, or that I am completely healed.
Right.
It's just ever evolving. It's going to be that way until I'm no longer on this earth. So while I'm here, I just want to make sure that I'm using my time to the best that I can. And I
Yeah.
feel like when you're given things like these particular things in your life, um, my thought is that once you have healed, it's kind of, um, a rite of passage. Like now it's your turn to help others and help them in their journey and help guide them. And
Right.
so that's what I try to do, no matter what.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, I mean, based on your book, you're doing a wonderful job of it. And one of the observations that I made in it, and I'm just going to keep showing it
It's okay.
so keep people can see it. But one of the things that is great about this, and I think that look, the the fact that you had this what everybody would say is an amazingly horrible experience with losing your father to violence. Um, I, it's not about that so much. It is because that's the kind of linear point of your life, but it's so much more than that. I think anybody who's like struggling and trying to find a way, it's a great read. Um, um, and I mean this in a great way because it's not complicated. It's not overly academic, and it is. You do a great job of not doing what I think is tough for people to hear who are struggling. In that the whole mentality of you need to do
Yeah.
this. You
Hmm.
need. It's like it's almost a bad way to start any
Yeah.
conversation. What you need
Yeah.
is like
No. I
okay,
I always
right?
tell people, like, it's your journey and it's not a one size fits all, and you've got to
Yeah,
find what works for you. And yeah, I can lay out, even when I go in to speak, my message is the same. I can give you the tools that I used, doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. But these are
yeah,
things that you can start out with, like such as the journaling thing, and
yeah,
you know, see if it works, see if it, whatever.
yeah,
And because it isn't a one size fits all. I'm not prescribing like you go out and
right,
do this and you go out and do that and you're going to be healed, voila,
right,
because it
yeah.
doesn't work that way. So everybody's
No,
journey is
yeah,
different.
agreed. I mean, I think I mentioned to you that therapist that kind of got me started on the right path, who I spent such valuable time with. He was so good that one of our local sports teams stole
Yeah.
him from us. I won't front him
Yeah.
off with that, but that's a good thing. I'm happy for him. But he guided me to the therapist I currently see, who's his equal. He's very, very good, and he's really encouraged me, like this podcast, and I do some writing, um, and he's really not pushed me, but encouraged me strongly to continue to do it. And I could see why. I mean, as it is, it's part of the healing process. It's good for me. I mean, this conversation's good for me. Um, but there's some. We talked about that. Um, one of the I wanted to mention, because somebody very close to me in my life, who I'll just say it's my daughter. She is a brilliant young lady who I'm very proud of, who put herself through a lot when she was 16, 17 years old, and to the point where her mother and I were like, oh, and her mother is a pretty exceptional person. It's a special ed teacher. So you can imagine my kids growing up with a father who's a homicide detective who gets lied to all the time. And their mother is a special ed teacher who has kids trying to manipulate her all the time. Like, it's very difficult for our kids to squeak through
Right.
anything, and they talk
Yep.
about, what I mean. But my daughter decided she wanted to be a realtor as well, and she is, and she's starting the journey and doing great. She works hard. She's got this great combination of street smarts and real intelligence, but she failed the real estate test a couple times. She may get mad at me for saying
So
that.
did I. You can tell her that.
I saw that in your
So
book.
did
I saw
I.
it, and I'm like, that's. I can't wait to tell my daughter,
Hmm.
like, look at this. This is the way that we're. And one of another quote that I just wanted to hit on, because one of my closest friends from college, who is an amazing guy. He's a three-time winter Olympian on the U.S. bobsled team. He's lived a great, incredible life. But he was with me. I was roommating. He was my roommate when on July 1st, 1987, and so he's been on this kind of journey with me as he's lived his life, I've lived mine. But you make this quote that I hear from him a lot, and it is, you put good stuff out there and let the universe take you where it's going to take you, right? And I smiled when I read that, and it gave me a little tear, because I'm like, I hear him say that a lot as
Hmm.
well, and that's a great observation. And whether it's your faith or whatever that is, I think that's amazing kind of observation, right?
Thank you.
Yeah. Um, so, uh, some of the other things that I saw, the quotes that struck me are great, because I've heard it before. I mean, God only gives you what you can handle. And I think sometimes people think, my the mother of my kids, she that's one of her kind of life sayings, and it's like, I think people think sometimes, well, how much does he think I can handle? But
I stopped
I think
asking.
that's part of the journey. Yeah, right. I think that's smart. There is no bottom end. Don't do that, right?
I just stopped asking.
uh,
So,
yeah, and then the other things that were, well, I'll just say, were difficult for me to read, but hit really close to home. I mean, you said in there, every time there's a mass shooting or policeman gets killed, it hits you, and I mean, I feel that every time. Yeah, I'm the same. It is. I don't watch a lot of television news. I just shut myself off for my own mental health. I don't need it. I know if something's going on,
yeah.
I'll hear about it.
But that's important, and that is the healthy route. And we had the shootings out here in Boulder, and the
Yeah,
officer was killed, and he had many children. Um, and I believe he was 42 years old, which was my dad's age. And um,
yeah,
I really didn't. We had a lot of coverage out here. Obviously, there was a lot of coverage, and they showed his funeral live, and I chose to not engage. I chose not to um,
Yeah.
watch anything. I didn't watch any of the coverage. I didn't watch any of that, and I still had a reaction. I
Yeah.
did. I did have a reaction, even though I didn't. You just know, like it just happens, right? And so I did
Yeah.
have a reaction to it that I wasn't expecting to have, but uh, because I had the tools, I was able to move through it.
Yeah.
But
Right.
that's the difference between like my mom and I is my mom chose to watch all the coverage and sit there and watch every single thing and just and when I told she asked me um it was right before Easter, and she asked me, did you watch all the coverage? Did you watch the coverage? And I said, no. Well, why not? And I said, because that's not the healthy thing for me to do for myself. And she
Right.
could not understand it. She could not wrap her head around it. And
Yeah.
and so and so that's the mentality
Yeah.
difference, right? And
Sure.
um I know now what's important for me to do, and
Yeah.
what's healthy for me to do for myself when these things happen. And unfortunately they happen way too often, and and it's
Yeah.
I think for me my mentality is when I see it, and yes it does affect me, but it affects me in the way of man, another family is joining this club.
Yeah. I can
And
imagine that's
I don't want this club, right? I want
no.
this club
Right.
to stop, and
Yeah.
and no longer. I don't want the wall in Washington to grow and grow and grow,
Yeah. Right. Right.
and so those are kind of the thoughts that go through my mind is when I hear those things. It saddens me because now there's another family that is dealing with that, and you know
Yeah. You made this quote that I love. You said this quote that I love. I got to be his daughter.
yeah.
And I think about that with my grandmother and my father. Like, how lucky am
Yep.
I? Right? How lucky am I that their blood courses through my veins, and I harp on my kids about that. Look, you carry this blood in your veins, and it's a gift.
Yep.
And I'm so excited for you that you have that recognition.
Oh yeah.
You know,
I I feel grateful every single day. Every day.
good,
Mm-hmm.
great. I mean, I like that. And also, one more quote I wanted to hit on here, and we'll get off the heavy stuff a little. But you say in there, in kind of in total, I surmise this, but I think it's really important for people to hear and think about. You're not defined by your weakest moments,
Mm-hmm.
right? And isn't that the truest thing? I don't care. I mean, I've talked to, I used to go to prisons all the time and talk to people because I just realized that it was a good way to get information as a homicide
Mm-hmm.
detective. And a lot of guys wouldn't do that. A lot of detectives, not, I say guys in the general term, men and women, like, I'm not really interested unless I have
Mm-hmm.
to. I'm not going. But somebody told me early on it's a good way to get
Yep.
information. They're not fun places, whatever. But um, you know, for anybody, whoever they are, you're not defined by your weakest moments. Sometimes there are horrible people who need to be in prison the rest of their life or worse, in my opinion, but that's a different
Mm-hmm.
conversation. But mostly it's not even about criminals, it's just about, people who struggle and people who have weak moments and feel like they're not, I'm always going to be
Right.
this. and no, you're not defined by your
No.
weakest moments. And I love that you point that out, so eloquently described that, because everybody has weak
Yep.
moments. You know what I mean? Everybody has those moments that they're not proud of, and they think of as huge mistakes, but that doesn't
Right.
define you, right?
Yeah, it doesn't. And, like I said before, we're all human, and
Yeah,
and we're going to make mistakes, and we're not perfect. And
yeah,
we're going to say the wrong thing. We're going to do the wrong thing, and
yeah,
um, I think the difference is that when you recognize that you do the wrong thing, uh, take responsibility for it and
yeah,
learn from it. Life is full of
yeah.
learning, and
Right.
that's why they call it a
And
journey.
right, and opportunities for
Yep.
redemption, right? I mean, they're always there.
Hmm.
So tell us about the book. How can people, my listeners, find this book? How do they get it?
It's on Amazon, and it is available in the paperback form. It also is on Kindle. If you are a Kindle Unlimited um, subscriber, you can read my book for free.
Okay, yeah,
And
sure.
I am going to work on doing a audio version of the book. I have to get into
Hmm.
a studio in order to do that. It's a whole nother
Yeah,
animal.
right, right. Yeah,
But I
sure.
am going to do my own narration. So, yeah.
Wow, good for
Yeah.
you. That I will enjoy hearing that. I mean, I listen. I do a little bit of hybrid of all of it, but there are sometimes like I wanted a copy of this, so I have a copy. And I don't think you can see it here, but sitting back there, I have Truman Capote's "In Cold Blood" that stays with me always. But good for you. So now, what else we've got going? You've got a coaching
Yeah.
company. Tell them.
Resiliency, empowering resiliency, um, coaching. And I'm also a speaker. So I'm always open to speak to any company, any organization. And you can find my information on susansnowspeaks.com. That
Yeah,
gives you all the information on my speaking. And
yeah,
yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm actually hitting a stage in Las Vegas in May, and
good for you.
pretty
Awesome.
excited about that.
Yeah, you should
And
be.
so I'll
That's
be speaking
fantastic.
either the 16th or 17th of May.
Yeah,
And yeah, I'm just, I was honored to speak to the Los Angeles police delegates September of last year, and
yeah.
felt like I had come full circle there. Um,
I bet you.
and was able to have some really, and just I was grateful to have some of the conversations that I was honored to have. And I think the Leo family is just important to me, and I feel like, if I can help with bringing to the forefront how important it is for your mental health to take care of yourself, and how it affects your day to day.
Yeah,
And wearing your emotional mask will only last so long.
right.
Compartmentalization will only last so long, um,
Yeah,
before it really starts to eat away at your relationships. So,
yeah,
I think that I'm hearing from that industry that the conversations are starting to open up about mental health and the importance around it, and that dealing with your mental health is not a weakness, it's actually a strength.
yeah. Right.
So, um, yeah, so that's kind of the message that I try to put out.
That's awesome, and that's really. I think we've covered it. Anything else? Anything
Well, I
else?
think we've covered it all.
I think so. Well, I really, really appreciate it. You're an amazing
Thank
human
you.
being, and I'm really honored to have met you. And I hope this isn't the last time we talk. I got a feeling that we're on a course that we'll meet again.
Me too.
So, but
Thank you.
congratulations on everything, and my best to your family,
Thanks.
and your entire family, and keep up the
Thank
great
you so
work.
much, Mike. I appreciate you having me on.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So there you go. Thanks for joining in. Susan Snow is quite an amazing woman, as you could tell. I really, really appreciate her taking the time to speak with us. It was a it was really a great conversation for me, cathartic, and as you can imagine, it's not coincidental that I start these interview um, series with Miss Snow right on the heels of telling you the story of Sergeant Kevin Arts, Walter Kevin Arts. Um, so I really appreciate it. Appreciate you checking in. Please, again, subscribe, leave us a review, um, download the episodes. It all helps us a great deal to continue to turn out this material. And one more time, for the record, Miss Snow's book, "The Other Side of the Gun," my journey from trauma to resiliency. Can't recommend it highly enough. So until next time, here's to Detective Thomas Williams, his sacrifice and his service. Sergeant Walter Kevin Arts. These men, uh, you know, they mean a lot to me, and what they did. So thank you again. Thank you so much for joining in. Until next time, thanks for joining us at Detective Story. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other.